One thing I've really learned in this industry is most people do not really know how to handle like really big emotions, and
Oh
so you
man.
get to know people real well when you're planning an event.
Unhospitality, the #1 podcast in the world.
Guys, have I got another great episode of Unhospitality for you today. I'm joined by Alexandra Corzo. Alex started her business over 20 years ago, A-list events, as a corporate meeting planner, meeting the needs and crafting events for some of the biggest names in the industry today. I'll tell you what, her client list is impressive. Once again, this episode was filmed at the East Hotel Miami. Check it out. You've heard me talk about it the last couple of episodes. Highly recommended. And thanks to them for setting us up with such a beautiful suite. Guys, I'm so grateful that you're joining me on this journey. Thanks for following along, for listening. I'd ask you to go hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram. It really helps out with some of the algorithms and getting noticed. But I'm very grateful for the feedback you guys have been giving me so far. I'm thankful you're following along. So without further ado, guys, here's Alexandra Corzo. Well, we're here with Alexandra Corzo.
Yes.
It's good to have you on Unhospitality. In Miami, you're pretty much an icon down here with your events. Tell me and tell us, our listeners, who are you? Who's Alexandra?
Thank you, Jeremy.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
for inviting me to be on this. I am an event planner. I plan corporate, social, and wellness events. And I started up in 2004,
When you were
24.
6 years old.
Right. So I was 24 at the time. I have to give you the what I studied in college because it kind of all comes full circle. I studied dietetics and nutrition at the University of Florida.
Wait
Always
a minute.
had,
Dietetics, nutrition, and you find yourself in events.
sir.
That's a weird path. I want to hear
No,
all about
yeah,
this.
yeah,
This
I
sounds
know. All right. Always had an interest in dietetics, nutrition, wellness. Just really got into working out when I was about like 16 years old. Back then, the diet fads and all that. I mean, we laugh about it now. What was trendy back then versus what's in right now. But for me, it's always been about healthy lifestyle, healthy choices, healthy habits. And so back then, all the questions that you get when you're 18 or your teens, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I always knew that health and nutrition was just something that always called to me. So that is what I pursued in college, graduated from there, came back down home to Miami. And as anybody knows, living in Miami is expensive. And I wanted to pursue the dietitian path. And so I got two jobs. One of them was with a registered dietitian, and the other one was with a corporate meeting planner. So I had two part-time jobs. Always wanted to be like financially independent. It was just kind of ingrained in me.
right.
I know. Well, some people maybe just it's not as much of a priority, but it just always has been for me. And so I took on the two jobs, and I really enjoyed what I was doing with both of them.
What was your role in the corporate meeting planning world? What would you do?
We would be that sort of one-stop shop to plan what are called CMEs, which are continuing medical education seminars. And she was working with Pfizer and Glaxo's at the time GlaxoSmithKline and Procter and Gamble had really big clients, and we would be the ones to have to book the hotel, book the flights for the speakers. We would need to communicate with the speakers. We would have to book their transportation. We would need to deal with banquets and sign the contracts and just book the spaces for them for these events. All the logistics from soup to nuts. So I was young, but I really liked what I was doing. I felt like I was good at it too. And at one point, my father was like, you have always been an event planner at heart, because this is also just stemming back to when I was a little girl, always been somebody who loved bringing people together and loved, throwing parties. I've always seen the value in bringing people together, and not only on a human level, but what it could do for brands, for companies. And then during that time, I was like, all right, so to pursue being a registered dietitian, which is ultimately what I had studied, um, I need to get my master's, and there were a bunch of prerequisites and requirements. Finished a couple of years of my master's, but I didn't complete it. What happened also at the same time was that things were growing, and I saw that she was my boss at the time, was trusting me enough to handle some events in certain cities. And I was young, so I was starting to travel to, like, I don't know, Nashville, to these meetings. And, she was really, really happy with my work. And I had a heart to heart with my boss and first approached her as to see if there was a way for me to grow there. And, at the moment, she couldn't, she couldn't, for whatever reason, she just didn't have that opportunity for me to really, help her take off with this and expand it and grow it. And I said, well, with all the, thank you for everything. She stayed on as a mentor for a few years. She was wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and do this on my own. So here's where it gets kind of interesting, exciting. I knew I wanted to get into events. I was like, you know what? This does make all the sense in the world. This is kind of who I am. And I love planning events. For the most part, I was starting from scratch. And at that time, I don't know if you remember these chocolate fountains.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? That could be a really cool thing that I can invest in to start meeting a lot of these catering, like everybody in the events world. Like, so I'll start meeting like high end caterers because this was a luxury back then to have a chocolate fountain. I mean, those things were renting like hotcakes, and it was profitable. In fact, that's how I met Angie, and that is ultimately how I met you.
Shout out
She was
Angie.
doing
Hey Angie.
Shout
We
out,
love
Angie,
you.
we love you. And so anyway, that kind of took off. And so I had few of these corporate gigs where they would hire me to plan like their small private dinners. I was able to incorporate my business, buy myself a desk. Oh, and I had a projection screen and like a mic, just very simple equipment. And that kept me really busy for like a good 4 or 5 years. Now, in that process, I was meeting all the luxury caterers. I was meeting all the people in the banquets, like in these nice hotels. And I was getting the word out there that I could plan events, that I could do your day of, or that I could plan your wedding. And so word of mouth. So I really did have to work the network from the inside out in that regard. And
Pause right there. You talk about building trust. Tell me some of the hallmarks of A-list events. What is it that you do that you feel you do best that build trust with your clients?
so I'm very transparent. I think I'm also very mindful of budgets. I think that ultimately when somebody calls, and in any business transaction, right, they want to know the underlying question in the back of their mind is, and even with a friend, a new friend, can I trust you? Can I trust you? And when it comes to events, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of money on the line. And then there's really the goal, the ultimate purpose of this event, whether it's to celebrate a milestone, a 50th birthday, and the launch, a grand opening of something for them, this client that maybe is calling me for the first time with this big budget, or whether a wedding, and they're like, hey,
Be
are
the
you
first time. Could be the second or
could be the
third. And yeah,
right, we
you
know
never know.
how that goes. But they wanna know, and ultimately I have to we, A-list events, has had to prove themselves over and over, and we need to make them feel like their event is our baby.
Yeah.
And
So
so
it's fair to say you try and align your vision with theirs to get on board with.
correct.
Okay.
Listen to them, hear out what their vision is. I don't think that I try to impose, ultimately they are hiring a professional for a reason. I think that I do a good job at being very, like a realist with them. I often joke about it, and sometimes I feel like it's tough to be in my position at first because people call us very excited to plan this event. And let's just say, they have a specific budget. And I'm like, okay, well, with that, we can do this. Um, and have you thought about this, that, and the other? And they realize how many decisions go into this process. And like, I almost feel like sometimes that initial phone call is like very much a reality check of like, wait a second, hold on. We may have called you a little too early, but thank you. I find that all of them find, no matter what, they appreciate the expertise. And I think it took me a while though to also get there. But trust is something that I think I've always made everyone feel comfortable from the beginning,
Even if
because
that means saying no.
even if it means saying no, 100%. But that sort of confidence I also got later on down the line because I was much more of a yes person initially, as we all are.
Yeah.
You're
You're desperate for
excited. Yeah,
business.
yeah,
You're trying to get off the
exactly.
ground. Yeah.
But then you start learning, how valuable your time is. And, life goes on and you learn through experiences or jobs lost or bids that, you really didn't operate as smart as you could have. You didn't maximize your time the way you could have. We were speaking a little earlier about, some of the interesting stories that have happened along the way. Those are things that, you have to go through in order to really be as prepared and as wise as I think only going through those experiences, I think, can you get to a point where you know how to handle them better. You're more resilient and better equipped, and that takes time.
Great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get to those experiences too. This is all about the untold stories of hospitality. So I know you've got a few that are just simmering below the surface of this conversation here. But finish out. So you now are 24 years old. You've got your business. You're learning along the way. You're learning what to say yes to, learning what to say no to. Do you have like a big breakthrough moment where you say like, I mean, I'm sure in those first couple of years you were a little apprehensive, like, could this even be a thing? But was there a moment that, okay, I'm officially an event planner and I feel like I've spread my wings enough that I can step in with confidence into the role that I'm in? Or did that happen from the very beginning?
Definitely not from the very beginning. I mean, I think I could celebrate every signed contract because it was ultimately somebody that felt, I was the person for the job, right? And I never take that for granted. And then you start seeing, I guess, who are these people? Where did they come from? And ultimately when I started, I think for me, it was probably when I was starting to be hired by Facebook and Disney and Norwegian Cruise Lines, and
Big names.
yeah, they're trusting you with important, really, really important events, and you've got these big budgets, and
I'd like to pause here though. You just threw out some really big like titans of industry right now. How do you go from a small Miami based meeting planning company to getting those names? Were there, I mean, you talked about word of mouth and contacts. Was that where that came from? Was it organically through some of the contacts you made and hey, I know someone in some of these bigger corporations, or were you actively pursuing those?
be totally honest with you, I opened up my business in 2004 and I had my first child and I got married in 2006, but had my first child in 2007. If you recall, 2006 was the beginning of that our recession. Um, I also was having children, right? So as a mom, and then also knowing that the majority of, I'm in an industry right now that is heavily affected, whether it's an economic recession or whether we're in a pandemic,
Sure.
and I can speak to that a little bit later. But it was ultimately, I think, every single event. And back then, remember, there was no Facebook. So we weren't really posting our work and stuff like that. I think it really, really was word of mouth and just being able to do a good job for each person. And and just really operating with integrity. I was in so many situations where, whether it was for a wedding, having to sit at the dinner table with, the father, and then, doesn't get along with the ex-wife, and how am I going to get everyone to get along this day, and you know what I mean, and just kind of also knowing your position in these dynamics where yes, I am the expert, I'm the pro that's going to help this wedding come to fruition, but then also kind of, and would imagine it's like this almost with every job, but you become like a psychologist, right? So I think that ultimately, yeah, the building of that trust, never getting so full of yourself, like you know everything, and just always knowing even today that you're a student at this.
But do you remember that moment? It's awesome what you're saying, and I love the humility you approach the job with. But do you remember those moments where you landed such a big client that you look back and say, "Wait a minute, how did I get here?" And the reason why I ask is I know there's a lot of us out here who are, starting their own thing or have started their own thing, struggling with the X's and O's of it, putting in long hours and never feeling like they're going to break through. You clearly have broken through on a level that you are, again, attracting some very titans of the industry as clients. What was that moment like where you finally realized, and what was that kind of the tipping point, I guess, to get you to that place?
But people need to see that you're doing it successfully over a period of time, consistently. You know what I mean? I think that is when people will be willing to take a risk, and I think that a lot of times, just like when I hire anyone new, I'll start small with them. So just always being like open, flexible, willing to work with whatever vision was, the budget was, and like just them seeing, I guess, ultimately like the passion and the drive and the ambition that I had to, or how can I say, we were aligned in the success of that event and what that meant for them. Um, ultimately is why I do what I do. The one for Norwegian Cruise Lines, they were in a bind, but they were brought to me through the wife. It's always like a friend of a friend of a friend, somebody who knows someone, tried and true, right? Because here's the thing, I never did really only the fountain did I pay for advertising and some wedding magazines and stuff back then. I never found it to bring me like the return. Ultimately, I would maybe make contacts by being present at a show, meeting people, just making that connection with them and then being like, call me. But that was a product that I was selling at the time. With a service, it really is a lot more niche and it really needs to be, through a trusted source or at least
Relationship driven.
they were in a situation and 2 weeks before their event, they were left without a venue. And the person this is actually a really beautiful story. So, the person who was in charge of planning that event, they're really in a situation right now where they have 2,000 people that they need to host in 2 weeks. And, I mean, we need the work, production, we need AV, we need catering, and we have no venue.
Hold on, that's actually a great part of it. What happened to the venue? They had a venue in place and it went away, or they didn't? They decided to do this thing last minute. What happened?
It was with political.
Okay, there were politics
Oh,
involved.
yeah. This was,
Okay,
and I honestly wouldn't even be able to really give you the details, but I know they were booked at a specific resort, and the company, was like, "We no longer feel aligned with this property,
got it. Okay,
and we're willing to take our losses."
okay, very interesting.
And so
And this is 2 weeks out.
and 2,000 people. So, Miami, if you're familiar, does not exactly have
Ton of space
a
for two
whole
thousand
yeah, we
people.
really only have about a handful.
We're not Orlando. We're not Las Vegas.
So we only really have somewhere around have about 6 or 5, properties that can accommodate that many people, even if that, 2,000 people for a sit down, for an award ceremony and all that. And, willing to take the risks, right? I said, "We can make this happen. God, please don't make it rain." You know what I mean? God, please don't don't rain that day, right? So, we walked through the whole space. I came up with a bunch of ideas. They loved them. Luckily, we put a whole tent out in their parking lot. That story, that one is I don't think is as relevant to our conversation today, so I'll leave it. But, it was beautiful. They were
I
so
think that's
happy.
actually very relevant, and I'll tell you why I think. Here's my take on that. When we sometimes think of landing the big account as some idyllic thing where all the stars align and you walk into a boardroom, you shake a hand, you make your presentation, everyone walks away like so bowled over and wow, that's a beautiful and this like idyllic picture of how an entrepreneur gains a client. Sometimes it's born out of exactly that kind of
Yeah,
crisis situation
100
where
yeah.
you almost don't want to take it on because it's such a crisis, it's such a delicate situation, but man, what a beautiful opportunity to turn something around. I've actually gained a client. In fact, I'll tell you what, Angie, the person who put it together. Shout out again, Angie. I went to her. She was already working with somebody who does what I do, and I said, Angie, you know what? I'm not going to disrespect that relationship. Beautiful. I'm glad you have it. I'll tell you what. If anything ever goes wrong with that relationship, you know what I do, and I think we established a bit of a rapport that day. If anything goes wrong, and you, for whatever reason you feel like you're not being served, let me know if I can help. And I left it at that. And it wasn't a month or two later. She's like, oh my God, we hit a crisis and this person's not helping us out. Could you get us out of this crisis? There was nothing in it for me from a financial standpoint. It was literally helping them avoid, it was like risk mitigation, getting them out of out of a situation that again, with for me, I had nothing to gain except the relationship. It was a crisis that led to that relationship. So we talk about crisis and the untold stories of hospitality. Don't be afraid of the crisis where you can provide answers. Don't be afraid of the crisis where you can step in and give, just like you did with NCL,
Yeah.
a solution to folks who desperately needed one. So good for you.
That's interesting because with Angie, what's so cool about our mutual friend Angie is she was actually my competitor at the time, right? So she was also renting these chocolate fountains, and she reached out like, "Hello, my name is Angie. You don't know who I am. I'm a total stranger, and I'm actually your competitor. But I don't know how it's going for you. I'm booked almost every weekend, and I need somebody that I can, at least establish, a relationship with where we can kind of send each other, how do you feel about that? And I was like, this is such a cool chick. Like, I want to be friends with you forever. And sure enough, we still are outside of work. Um, I didn't feel that from the community at the time. Miami, and I would say still, I'd like to think this younger generation is definitely better at it. They're much better at community over competition and collaboration over competition. But I didn't feel that initially. I really did feel like every man for himself, every woman for themselves. I didn't feel that much of like a camaraderie in the industry. Again, I wasn't out there as much. You're asking me how I made a lot of these contacts. I wasn't out there as frequent because I had a child, and I really wanted to be present for him. And sure enough, I got involved in all his school events and I planned his galas, etc. But I had a full plate, right? So being able to just automatically hit it off with someone like Angie, those crisis situations. Look at how we can look back and say and connect all the dots and see how things come full circle. I think is a really, really beautiful thing. And you can make a lot of these really lifelong relationships. And I often say to my friends that are, and I wonder if other people would agree with this. I've had situations where I find that it's a lot more likely that you can work well with someone first and then develop a very close relationship than the other way around. There are times that maybe you start trying to work with a lifelong friend and you're like, yeah, we do not have the same working styles like this. And sometimes it hinders the friendship even, and that's something that I've learned over time. And I'm not saying it's the only possibility if you do it one way or the other. No, but it's a lot more likely that you will work really well with somebody and then you can form really tight connections with them even outside of work and for life, and you never know
So
where the opportunities.
let me make sure I'm picking up what you're putting down. Even if at first you're not connected 100%, but then you go through an event together, you kind of figure the pieces out of a crisis perhaps, or you're putting pieces together for an event, that bond is formed over the work to be done. And then you develop the friendship from there. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes. And it's not that I think if you work well together and you're already put in these positions, especially with event planning, where you're both under high stress, right? So one thing I've really learned in this industry is most people do not really know how to handle like really big emotions, and
Oh
so you
man.
get to know people real well when you're planning an event.
Oh man.
And so how far along in their journey
Their
are
human
in their
development.
human development, are they? And for all kinds of reasons. And so, man, have we been, through stories upon stories that we could tell, but you get to know people real well in moments of, stress. And so once you're able to kind of get past that,
How do you get past that? How do you, that's a great point, because I think so many times we get hijacked ourselves as the service provider in the emotion of the moment, in the emotion of our client. How do you handle that? How do you get through that moment where you're feeling the urge to have your emotions rise to the level of your client's frayed emotions?
um, great question. I have to remember that they're trusting me to keep it together. You know what I mean? They're bringing me on board because something about me makes them feel like I can stay cool when I need to. If I'm in a situation, God, you're remembering me of this. I have to bring up this story. If I'm in a situation where there's high stress, but there's still so much that needs to be managed, like imagine if I panic. You know what I mean? Like I'm the last person. So
They're looking to you to keep it together, right?
totally. Now, there's a lot to be said about that too, because for me to think that, for anyone to think that I don't, I'm not an emotional person, I still cry every time the bride walks down the aisle, and it's such a beautiful thing to see the father-daughter, and like every time it gets me. But how do I know? I think you need to know and assume like your role in the situation, in the dynamic, why you're there and what your goal is. And if your goal and your objective is always on that bigger picture, which is just see this event through, no matter what, then you can kind of handle it in a way where you don't allow it you don't take it personal, and
You can detach yourself. Yeah.
detach yourself from it in a way and understand that it's not personal. And I wasn't always that way. There were definitely some situations where there was a bride or someone that would just snap at me. I'm like, and then me, I'm not one really, now that you know me a little more on a personal level, like I'm not really one to like take bullshit. But I think people also appreciate a little bit of that. Like I'm going to just tell it to you exactly how it is in terms of, you know, 24 hours before, if you're thinking about turfing your entire backyard, like no. I've had clients like hey, am I being a little bit unreasonable? Yes, you're being unreasonable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just
Yeah.
being super frank, upfront with them, but delivering it in a way that is not, offensive.
Well, the worst, the alternative is you overcommit to something, and then everyone's miserable when you can't
Totally.
complete
Let's
what
be so
you're.
for real right now with what we can deliver on and what's going to be practical and, it's not going to cause a risk or liability for anybody to trip and or hazard or anything. Let's promise what we could really deliver on.
Under promise and over deliver as
Exactly.
opposed to the opposite.
And so, with these situations and these high stress situations, I think you just again, you've got to go through it. The only way out is through. And being able to know how to handle yourself. Can I share a story about
Please do. This is what we're here for, sharing stories. I love it.
this was a wedding for a very affluent family. They had hired a celebrity photographer whom we won't name. But I knew going in already, given our talks before, our planning meetings and stuff like that, how this was gonna, go. But I didn't think it was gonna happen like this. So,
Okay, but wait a minute. What was your instinct when you're going through these meetings?
well,
Are
he's
you
a celebrity
positive, negative, or
photographer.
it's like
He was a
go?
celebrity photographer. They brought in this photographer who was
Mhm.
charging an arm and a leg, astronomical fees. And just preface the conversation with, well, I filmed Diddy's da da da, and I filmed. I mean, gosh,
So very impressed with his own resume.
exactly right. And so that is something also. It's a skill that you develop over time, where you could start seeing, you can see the ego, you can see where this person's coming from, and my job as an event planner, really, ultimately, I think, is to be that buffer. And so many times we get such a bad rap because I think there are certainly event planners that walk in, think they're the diva, think they can speak to whoever, however they want. And I'm not that person. I am nice to everybody, as in real life and
You're speaking my
professionally.
language.
And
Doesn't cost you anything to be kind.
absolutely not. And so I've never understood that. I find that there's no excuse for it. Not on the client side, not on the vendor side. There's no excuse for rudeness,
Being an asshole.
being an asshole,
Yeah.
And so, yes, I understand it gets trickier when you're on, you're the wedding planner, and perhaps maybe that is coming to you from a client. You got to really kind of hold it in, at least for the duration of that event. But there's no excuse for ill behavior. So anyway, wedding day comes, everything's fine, everything's beautiful. They get married, and right outside of the church, I'm already so typically when the bride and groom walk in, I'll leave somebody on the team behind, but I'm heading back already to where the reception is because I need to make sure everything's set there. We have however many people about to arrive, and we need to make sure that all the setup is complete, etc. So the photographer gets to the reception and is like blowing up my phone, you know, "Please come see me. I'm in the back," da, 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 and he's like freaking out. The camera that has all their wedding pictures, I left it outside on the curb, because, they're always in these like compromising positions when they're trying to get the right shot and stuff. I guess he had 2 cameras with him. He left the second one. So then right there walk in the bride and the groom, and this is behind the scenes. So cocktails already happening. And this man is freaking out in front of the bride and groom. Freaking out.
In front of them?
Yes.
Eesh.
And the bride was so sweet. She was like, "Oh my God, da, da, da." And the groom, he's really working things up. And I'm like trying to calm the photographer down, like, "Listen, come
Right.
over here." You know what I mean?
Not their
And the
problem, it's
groom
yours,
turns
right?
to me and he's like, "Listen, I don't know what he's saying and I don't know what he's gonna do about it, but I'm about to punch him the fuck out.
Yeah.
So if you can handle this." I kind of get him into a room, like, "Breathe, take a breath, please. Like, here's some water." He's like, "The pictures, and I can understand because those are
Of
their
course.
photos. This is
Yeah,
huge."
but still,
Right.
if anyone's looking to you to be calm or
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm like, "All right, don't worry. Look, keep doing your job. I'm gonna get the team to call the church." We call, nobody's answering, nobody's answering. Finally, we get a call back from one of the nuns.
It was in another location, by the way. He left it back at the church and
Correct.
you're now at the
So,
reception
yeah.
area. Okay, okay.
And so, anyway, we get him to calm down and just go photograph the rest of the cocktail.
Use the
At
camera
the
you
end, no,
have
but
and relax.
they all hired the camera for a reason. They want all kinds of different shots and stuff. I'm like, "Me myself and my team will handle this." So we're making the calls. We finally get a call back, and one of the nuns we found, this. I'm like, we're missing a camera. She's like, we're gonna go check. Da, da, da. They end up finding it. Perfect. We end up Ubering. So the whole time, this guy keeps coming back and is flipping out, like just really unprofessional. Where it's like, all right, buddy, just because you got to film this like celebrity wedding, whatever, doesn't mean now that you could just act however. Like, grip it, dude. Like, get your emotions together because that's what
It's his drama, but it's not the bride and groom's drama, and it's not their. I mean, you're putting a crimp in their day.
So I send somebody on my team and to go and pick up the camera. Back then, I don't even think Uber was existed. So my guy, yeah, one of the guys on my team goes, brings it, and he gives him like $5 and he goes, thank you.
You're
I
kidding me.
swear. I was
Oh,
like, you
$5.
suck, man.
What a
Like
dick.
just like for that, give nothing. You know what I mean? Like
Hey,
whatever. And I was
exactly.
just
Don't
like,
even
dude,
bother.
and then what at the end, I'm not, that's it. This is their special day. Like, we're not going to talk about this story. I don't think we ever did speak about the details. I wasn't that close to the couple where there are a lot of clients that we end up doing like a whole post wedding, like talk about everything kind of thing. But my job is ultimately that they don't feel any of that, you know? And so I do feel like proud of how we handled it. And I learned what not to do. And that I learned that some people, all they have, sometimes some people, all they have is money. Sometimes all people have is that one celebrity client that hired them for whatever, and then they just so in terms of you asking me, like, when was that moment that you knew you made it and stuff, like, I don't really feel like, yes, I'm proud of myself, absolutely, and yes, that has helped me build confidence and equip me, like, with resilience to handle tough situations going forward. But, made it, you know what I mean? Like, I think I'm still at it, I'm still
I'd argue, as listening to your story, I'd argue that I probably framed the question the wrong way. It's not that you made it in terms of the client list you have or the book of business, but you make it when you're able to handle a situation like that and a
amen to
crisis like
that.
that with the skill and the tact that you did. Well done.
Well, that speaks to then, I think, also the nature of maybe a lot of these conversations that are a lot more of like bringing the human side of what we do, right? Where it's like on the outside, oh, it must have been when you got that first paycheck from this big name or whatever. But really, what it is what it does to you as a person, as a professional, and how well equipped you are to handle some really tough situations that now you can go into conversations and know what you're talking about and be respected, where people are like, okay, she knows something, And that is a beautiful thing that I would say happened to me right around. And I get angry with myself because I'm like, why did it take me that long? But somewhere around 35 years old, just to put it,
Pretty young at 35.
right around 35, I think, like, okay, I know something. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this already for a while.
But that's also beautiful too, because I think people start out from the gate and expect to be an expert on everything and have this experience that they haven't had. They don't have the experience to feel like an expert. And look, we live in an age of instant gratification. We have 15-second, attention spans with our social media feeds. The ability to lean into something over a long period of time and put in the hours that it takes to become an expert is not something that we're, especially in this generation, not to talk like I'm some old fart, but you know, the idea that we expect things instantaneously. I think it's beautiful that you share that story that after 10 years is when you finally feel like, okay, I've got my footing here. That's actually a great testament to not only your stick to itiveness, but your humility in saying, you know what, I had to go through 10 years of experiences and ups and downs for me to get, I feel like I know a little bit about this. Good for you. Yeah. We talk about first, let's, before we get into some of the more touchy feely stuff, there's any other stories you want to share that you feel are kind of like off the charts? People wouldn't believe this kind of thing. Do you want to share that? I want to eventually get into like the emotions behind it, some of the things that has taught you on a more spiritual level. You're talking about healing and things like that. I want to open up the conversation to that. Before we get there though, I don't want to discount any other wild stories you might have wanted to share or something that happened like, oh my god, I couldn't believe this
Yeah.
happened.
So I think so. I'll talk about this one event where, and this one I could name a name because I just won't name the venue.
Okay,
So
sounds like the venue
another,
misbehaved.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
another Norwegian Cruise Line event, 1,000-person award ceremony, end of year celebration, and big budget. We are hosting it at these this venue, this facility, which has been around forever. And we start our setup from Wednesday before. So the event is on, sorry, Tuesday before. So the event's on Friday. We started all the setup and the bringing in of all the AV equipment, and we were transforming the whole place to be in like an underwater. The theme was Passion Propels Us. And so we made it like, cruise and, like feeling like you were underwater. So it was just a lot that went into it. And so we started our setups, everything was fine. There was no problems with the venue operating, bathrooms operating fine, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, event morning comes, and I walk in. Our event is at 3 p.m., and I walk in at around 9 a.m. Already with most of the setup complete. We had already done rehearsals, sound checks, and everything the day before. And we had walkie talkies, and I noticed that it's really hot in there. And so I pick up the walkie talkie and I call for my contact there. I'm like, hey, please come in. Um, it's warm in here. It's going to take a while to warm up this venue. Like, let's turn on the AC. And they're telling me, no problem, we're on it. We're on doing all the rest of the things, putting table numbers, table names, doing all the other things. And I notice it's 10 o'clock. They still haven't
Not
turned it
getting
on.
cooler.
Guys, please turn on the AC. Like, this is going to take a long time to cool. We have 2,000 people, and I'm not losing my stuff, but they're just trying to figure out how the hell they're going to explain this to me. By the third time, I'm like, what is going on? Somebody please tell me, like, and they're like, Alexandra, please, like, come see us in the other building. We're here with the fire
Where this is
department. Yes, we're here
going.
with the fire department. We need to talk to you about something. So I go, fire department's there. They're in the whole, basically the AC had broken down. And we live in Miami. So what is it right now? We're in January right now, and today was like 85 degrees or
Or
something, you know
weather.
what I mean? So
Yeah, of
we
course.
were, we have our cold days, you know what I mean? But that certainly was
This
not one
wasn't
of
one of
them.
them.
Was not one of them. And so, I'm like, please God, like, praying to everything and everyone. And, I was just like, not today, like, please not today. And not to this client, because I'm actually one of those people where, even if it's a friend, if it is a friend or if it is a good human, I want to do that much better of a job for those people. You know what I mean? Because they've been nothing but a absolute joy to work with. Not only that, what this means to them, I'm like, okay, so we're there. Luckily, this is an established venue. It really could happen to anybody or to
Sure,
anywhere,
sure.
and it's an old venue, and so that was what happened. Luckily, it was a power outage, like, on the whole block or something like that. So they weren't the only call being put in, but because they were who they were, luckily, fire department was able to address this first. They had already that established relationship with
What
the
time in the
city.
morning is this now? It's just like we're close to the
So
event. We're
now clients
still
like, I'm on the way, now we're at around 12 o'clock. Event starts at
okay.
3,
3 hours
12
away.
o'clock, I'm with the fire department. It's still not fixed. And so meanwhile, backup house team is like calling every party events rental company in the city. We have like air cooling units coming in. But at the same time, I'm having to put everything in writing, right? Because it's like, we need to cover our ass and we need to know whatever this is going to cost, because we're obviously going to pay it. I'm not telling the client right now what's going on. I'm just going to get this, and even then, such a massive space. Like, who knows if this would even made a difference, but we needed to just get to working on a solution. Um, so we've got cooling units coming in, and then I need to put everything in writing to make sure that they agree in writing that they're going to pay for it, because, I'm not going to get stuck then now with a $10,000 bill. That's not fair. So fine. All this is going on. Finally, the AC turned on maybe at around 11. Client walks in at 11:15. I almost fell to my knees when he walked in, because he was such a cool person already that I did feel like it was okay for me to tell him, like, you have no idea what just happened right now.
You don't wish
You
for those moments, but they definitely form you, I think.
Yeah.
Which I love that I'd love to head in that direction right now. You talked about your path to hospitality having to do with dietitian and wellness. I know you do some wellness events now. I think your entire aura and your brand seems to be built on keeping cool in the midst of crisis, which is why you build that trust and why you're able to establish those relationships. Talk a little bit more about the secret sauce behind it. What has hospitality taught you? What has holding events taught you in terms of some of the deeper, more, I guess, profound lessons of life?
But you mentioned wellness, so are you saying that what now is kind of leading me
Well, I guess
to
both. I mean, the practice of wellness and some of the events that you're doing, but also like what's like the underpinning effort there is more of like a spiritual pull, I guess.
I love that question. I love that question. I think that when COVID hit, as you know, that deeply impacted the hospitality industry on so many levels.
Yeah.
I for one, my experience looked like 29 events getting canceled um, over 2 weeks and really no idea, indefinitely, right? So all that work where a lot of us weren't as well prepared with our contracts to protect us in the way that we should have at least gotten compensated for the hours invested in the work that we had done,
Sure. You left holding the
So that was
bag.
hard. That
Yeah.
was so hard. But like with it did with everybody, where it was very much a drawing back to the drawing board, a reassessment of where am I in my life? Am I happy with what I'm doing? Do I feel valued? Do I feel like I'm centered with my purpose? How happy am I about the work that I'm doing? And I'll be super honest with you. Um, I started to do a lot of kind of soul searching and just more of a deep dive. I was also going through a separation at the time. And I really started kind of digging and reading and soul searching into myself, right? And knowing that what I do as a profession can be very, very high stress. And so it's not rocket science, but it is. I often say it. I know we're not, curing cancer, but we are expected to make miracles. And a lot of times when things go as like when things work out, it's just as expected. It really isn't ever it's kind of like a thankless job. And it's also high stress, like I mentioned. And so, what do I do with all that emotion? Like, I am human, right? So, I do internalize all of it. What are the healthy ways in which I'm alchemizing that sort of energy, that I take in? And how do I release that in a healthy way? And, where are we? I think it does speak like on a global level. Like, why are we sick? Why is there a pandemic, and what does this say about how we're living our lives? And I started really looking at, and it's not to badmouth any of it, I just really do feel like my heart I've really always enjoyed the corporate aspect of what I do more, but really wanted to start pushing more towards wellness. I feel like I wanted to make more of an impact, um, on more of like a just kind of bettering our daily lives. And I started feeling like we weren't well. I think that we are living in a society that's even still really just, what is it? Work to live, instead of
Or live to work. Yeah.
to work,
Yeah.
instead of work just to live, right? And I think you being somebody that travels a lot, I travel a lot too. You get that perspective where it's like, hey, these people seem a lot happier. And I started really looking closely at how much money was going into some of these things and how much food we throw away after a wedding, all the flowers that just get dumped out, and there's nothing wrong with that. I am the first person that knows that and believes in spending money on a celebration because I feel like that and those memories and stuff are to last a lifetime. But it really, the waste, I think I started becoming just a lot more conscious
It's
of
not
that
that there's
waste.
anything inherently wrong with celebrating or having an event. How we do it though matters, I think. How we do it, and but just like you're pointing to, the waste uh, we think that money is the remedy, and we'll just throw money at it. It doesn't really matter the impact we're having in other areas as long as we pay for it. And I think that's a short-sighted view.
Add to that, that here I am, on the front lines witnessing firsthand that much of this, many times, at least with weddings, performance. And it really is about outdoing the wedding they went to before. And it really is about the celebration and not about the full meaning. So like I planned several weddings where I'm like, these two people despise each other and we're just getting started. All right, good
Yeah,
luck.
yeah.
But if on the
Meanwhile, spending whatever, dropping
oh,
$250,000 on a
like it's
wedding.
not, yeah. And again, there's to each their own, and that's their prerogative, and I'm definitely gonna be there to make sure that it goes off,
But it does get
like
you to question values and realign yourself, I think, to something that's more true to who you are. I don't know. At least seeing something like that would make me kind of question my values.
totally. So I just wanted to do more meaningful work, you know what I mean? And What can I do? What can I do? What can I create that will really start to make at least a little bit of a difference? Like how we were speaking about before, like you coming into this podcast, and sometimes you're doing it just because you feel called, but you don't fully have like the super definitive answer as to why, but you trust that somewhere along the way, like this is definitely, this is I'm gonna this is the way.
One drop of water in the bucket at a time.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. So COVID happens. A-list loses all their events for the foreseeable, at least for that whole year, right? So that was
How
March.
did you feel in that moment? Let's stop right there because I know people. I have some tragic stories from that moment where actually I know someone who took their life because they didn't have their business crumbled. And I know short of that, people went into panic mode. And I can only imagine this is your livelihood. How did you feel in that moment when your business canceled and all your income essentially went away? Your identity, it sounds like, went away. What did you feel?
Honestly speaking, I went into this survival mode, but that's very much the personality, and maybe it also makes me good at what I do. Um, I am one of those people that will eventually be, not eventually, immediately be like, all right, here's what we need to do. Game plan, like, in fact, I'm optimal. Like, it's funny because it also stems into I have ADHD. I was diagnosed later in life, and so I can go off on that subject, and it's interesting how, also it plays a role in maybe why I am as good at what I do as I am. But give a person with ADHD a deadline that is 2 years from now, forget about it, not gonna happen. Now tell them something that is like a crisis situation, that's where we perform optimally. So to answer that question totally honestly, I started doing, like, live streams with people. I did one with Angie. We were just like, "How are we gonna, like, survive?" We're just having these super frank and open conversations that we're having right now, but, like, came up with I was like, I need to, like, figure out what is everybody doing, like, how are we gonna survive this, and how can we hold each other's hands through this process? But of course, I mean, almost, what, 2 weeks after that, it's like sadness too, because, first of all, people are dying, like, really, people are dying. We didn't have a vaccine. We didn't know, and then there is the media, and people were, oh my gosh, thousands and thousands. You were seeing the stretchers, and you didn't know what was real, what was not. Our parents, we were fearful for them. In our position, you and I, Jeremy, that we're pretty close in age, I think, we're worried about our parents and we're worried about our children. Our kids are now having to adapt to, which my other son also has ADHD, and he's now having to study and learn on a screen that maybe he was captivated by all of 10 minutes. My older one, who's much more, I mean, he was optimal. He was Minecraft on one and learning everything. I mean, I don't know. It's like your brain is just kudos to you. But it was so sad. It was sad, it was scary. I did what I could as a member of my community and as a family member where, we were, many of us were filing for unemployment. Um, and it was just like, wow.
But it brings you to this place of this sadness, this somewhat desperation, brings you to a place of reflection, of digging deeper into a new path. Perhaps you're going to still serve corporate interest when the corporate interest comes back, but beyond that, you're more interested in wellness.
Yes. So I get on LinkedIn, I look at my resume, I dust that thing off digitally, and I'm like, I need to find a job. I'll share with you that I had also recently separated just a year before. So when you make such a life altering decision, you cannot do so foolishly. You need to know, like, you have the finances to back up your decision. And I was prepared. I had about a year's worth of savings. And, but that was made a decision. Year goes by, COVID hits. Thankfully, banks were giving grace periods at the time. Um, Everything just came like kind of crumbling down where it's like, "Holy shit," like, now I'm really at this, because when recession happened, I was still married, and thanks to my husband at the time, we had his income to fall back on. Now I'm single with 2 kids, and a mortgage that I'm paying on my own, so what now, right? So anyway, back to the drawing board, go start applying for jobs, and I had only done that once, well, before, but it's recession and pandemic, right? Where I'm like, all right, I have developed this skill set. I have all this experience planning events. Like there's definitely, but again, I'm looking for jobs in event. I applied for a job in Carlsbad California, and it's for Chopra Global. And I'm like, this is like dream job right away. Like I said, I was doing some soul searching. I had started reading some Deepak Chopra's books and Eckhart Tolle, and I was going down that whole path of, like self um, development, and really honed in on like a lot of these podcasts and stuff and what that was doing for me on a healing level, not only with what the crisis of the moment was, but both globally and personally. And so anyway, I applied to this job. I'm like, "Yeah, right, they'll never call me back." They call me back. Not only did they call me back, I went on for about 5 interviews and I made it to the top 2 people to basically the job was to plan their 5 wellness retreats in the United States and in Mexico. And that for me, even though I hadn't really known about Deepak Chopra for long, I had really just learned of him maybe just 3 years before that, but I knew he was like kind of a big deal and I really liked his teachings and it really, resonated with me the way that he delivers his messages and stuff. It's just I found it to be very beautiful. So I was like planning wellness retreats. Oh my gosh, like dream job that I didn't know like I needed, and so I applied, they call me, the job ends up going to a woman that had a lot more experience planning outdoor festivals, like a lot of these wanderlust festivals and stuff like that. And my profession, I would say my expertise is a lot more niche. It's more boutique, even though we have planned events for upwards of 2,000 people. We don't really plan like large 20,000 person festivals and stuff like that. Totally understood their decision. But the fact that like Chopra Global would consider A-list events or Alexandra Corzo at and that dynamic would have been they were gonna hire me full time. Wow.
It sparked something in you.
Yeah, like, I'm just me, you know what I mean? I mean, at the time, I had already built something, you know what I mean? But I really am the face. I'm the one that kind of really created this on my own. I really know something, and I feel like I'm marketable, more so than I thought, more so than I originally thought, and I'm proud of myself, so,
Good for you.
um, now again, that was in the world of wellness, and I'm like, all the signs are pointing to. Then I end up landing another, this was as an independent contractor with A-list events. I get hired by Hacienda Altagracia, which is a luxury resort in Costa Rica, which is paradise on earth. I cannot describe that place anymore magical. It, you know, it's an
Yeah,
auberge,
Birch Collection.
property.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. What's the
So
name of the property again?
Hacienda Altagracia.
Altagracia. Okay.
Sí,
Hmm.
Hacienda Altagracia. Is the H silent there?
Hacienda. I don't know.
Hacienda.
Depends on if you're speaking English or
English or
Spanish.
exactly, I said it like So anyway, the type of property where you fly to San Jose, then it's another charter plane, you land right on the property. I mean, oh my gosh, it was just and that was, brought to me by an acquaintance at the time who was following at that time now we're on social media, we're posting our work and she's like, "What are you doing right now?" And I'm like, "Honestly, just trying to trying to recover from this because this was, already maybe a year and a half after." You have to remember also, like, that year, you're so that year and a half after, you're actually facilitating and executing the events that were supposed to be for 2020, and so it's like,
Make up
we're
for
not
lost
really
time.
profiting a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
lot
You're
either
digging out
here.
of a
Yeah,
hole at that
yeah.
point, right?
People are having to fly in for these events, so they just kept getting
And
postponed,
even
and
then, they weren't even
finally
full events. They were usually a half speed with a huge amount of social distancing. So even the events are at half
the
speed and
money
half money.
didn't
Exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, she's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "We need somebody at this property to help facilitate all the wellness retreats." And she's like, "We think you'd be perfect for it." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, dream job, other dream job, like actual." And so that goes on for about 6 months. Eventually, they needed somebody on property to live at the hotel. I have 2 kids,
Not a
and
bad gig
that's
either, but it just wasn't for
not at
you.
all, but
Yeah.
I could
Not at this
yeah, I
point in your life,
couldn't,
at
right.
least. Yeah.
And so and that's it, I mean, I understood, absolutely. They needed somebody in-house, to be able to book all those, retreats and stuff, and, left off with a great recommendation letter by the GM and all that was awesome. So that was a great opportunity. But I'm like, what is, you know what I mean? Like, what gives? Like, seriously, this is something, and this is something that I keep thinking about, that I keep feeling called towards. And that brings us to just most recently, where it used to be a little bit, A-list used to be more corporate and social. Now we run on these three pillars of corporate, social, and wellness. And then we did this first launch for Access Miami in August of last year. I produced that event and was the co-founder of that event. And I also learned so much because that's another new world that we're kind of tapping
Tell
into
me
in
more
terms
about it.
of
What does the event entail, and what are you doing at Access Miami?
yeah.
Access
So
Miami?
Access Miami
Uh-huh.
was took place last year. Now A-list events. I mean, no one really knows this yet, but we're gonna launch Unio.
Hold on.
Yeah,
We have breaking news here,
breaking
folks.
news.
Breaking news.
Yeah, we're launching. Yeah, this is the first time I didn't. I haven't even told my parents about this.
Mom and dad,
So
we have
yeah,
news.
Mom, I made it. No, hopefully, right? God willing. And so Access Miami was great in that it taught me a lot of lessons. It helped me tap into a market that I didn't or wasn't even sure existed. And what I want to do is merge my experience and my expertise in corporate and conference event planning, but then also grab your wellness. I don't want to call it a retreat, but your wellness event and kind of merge the two. I find that there is no shortage, as I was mentioning to you earlier, is there is no shortage of, you know, the yoga event with all the pretty girls and the Lululemon outfits and the matcha and drinking green tea, showing up to the event, doing their little class, grabbing the free swag, and then heading out for drinks later with their friends. I find that there is no shortage of that in this town. And what I think is more needed and more meaningful and more aligned with where I want to go in life is bringing a lot more substance to these events where we can bring men and women. That's another thing. I find them to be 99.99% female attended. And I know that, and especially as a mom of two boys, that men need this too.
Oh, man.
How can we do that? And how can we be creative to do that? I've learned through the fintech conferences that I've been planning where it's mostly male dominated. I've learned how they learn. You know what I mean? I see what attracts them and what they need in a setting to feel captivated. And I do find that we're a little bit kind of hardwired a little differently where we do well and connect with people around us through emotion. I think men are a lot more logical. Men are a lot more information and fact based and education based and science based. And so what we did at the last event, which was Brandon, a neuroscientist who did a live EEG, so it's sort of like a brain scan where we put, this kind of cap on one of the attendees when she had first arrived, and it monitored her brain activity throughout the entire event. So if we started at 9 a.m., by 2 p.m., right, before the close of the event or 3 p.m., we put those results up on a big screen, and the neuroscientists was able to explain to everybody what they were seeing. So between the theta waves and so in between that time though, we had done sessions like sound healing sessions, and we had done breath work. We had done a spinal energetics session. We brought in practitioners from both, and that's why we came up with the name Access to blend both, hemispheres, because a lot of these practitioners came from London, and so we were just, merging talents from both hemispheres to bring forth something that I feel, and I know my partner in this feels as well. We were able to really execute pretty flawlessly. We hosted that at the Sacred Space, which is an awesome, awesome space for that. My partner at the time was not familiar with any spaces here in Miami, and so A-List came in and just did what we do, which is really kind of curate this entire experience for everybody. As we were promoting the event, I was getting a lot of positive feedback. And I even till today, I get messages on LinkedIn by, people who are partners at law firms, men that are like, hey, when are you doing this again? I remember you did this event. I couldn't make it to the first one, but like, please, we absolutely could benefit from this. And so that tells me, you know what I mean, that it calls to them. And I cannot wait to like produce um, this next experience for people that we're hoping to
Dates? Do you
bring.
know when it's going to
So,
launch? We're still working on that.
yes, so we're all in the works. In a perfect world, we'll be able to do this definitely annually, if not semi-annually. But then I also want to pitch it to my corporate clients as kind of like you can also hire us to curate an entire experience for your employees where we can do a full day. But I really want this to feel more of, if we're hired by a corporate client, that they know that they're doing this to invest in their employees' well-being. So ever since, COVID, not it's always been important, but even more so in a world post-COVID where, employees are asking themselves, do I feel valued here? Like, what's the company, like the work culture like, And so it's never been more important, right? For those people to feel valued. And I think that the way that you do that, as an employer is you tell them, hey, have this day on us. You're not going to be sold all a million things that you need to, it's not going to be all branded with everything in terms of like, we're going to just like
Sales
sales,
goals and
sales, sales,
higher.
sales.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, this is like just treat yourself on us. And so that hopefully will be more of like the energy going into these events and the overall, and hopefully in that and where I came up with the name Unio. Unio in Latin stands for two things. It stands for the self, but then it also means to unite. And so I'm hoping that people go into this more so and with the thought that they're doing this for themselves, which they are, but inadvertently and you know in the long run, in that they can build community and they can make connections and they can, talk about all kinds of things that, that can help you cope with stress and bring forth the information and the education where people can, whatever it is, whether it's breath work, whether it's a 2-minute something that while you're at a red light, anything that will help you get through your day um, in a more conscious and calm way.
That's beautiful.
We can all benefit. Do you
Yeah,
agree?
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a firm believer, Alex, that our life is a series of collecting dots that we might even not know why we collected them at the time, but eventually we start to connect them and it starts to form a bigger, more complete picture of all the experiences we've had that we have brought to this present day. We put them together in a beautiful way. And I can't think of a better way to sum up what I'm hearing from you with all your experiences, with all your successes, having taken pieces of all of these things to come up to this beautiful point where you're mixing your event experience, your corporate experience, now to bring this wellness and to find this overlap of these events to bring more meaning to exactly what you're doing. Just like you said, it's a beautiful way that you've collected eventually to connect these dots, and it's beautiful. So thank you for
Thank you,
sharing that
Jeremy.
story.
Thanks for
Yeah,
letting me share that.
I'm very thrilled
I
you're here with
honestly
us.
really, really appreciate it because I'm able to also just process a lot of this information out loud, and that makes a difference.
Amazing. Give us, as we close here, a sentence, 2 sentences, a paragraph. What does hospitality mean to you?
Hospitality to me means understanding the other person's experience, and wanting to optimize that for them as best as possible. Hospitality to me can also mean connection. And actually, I would say those two things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Alexandra, this has been a pleasure. What a delight to speak to you. Appreciate you joining us. This is a budding venture of mine on hospitality, becoming the #1 podcast in the world. Little play on words there to make it fun, but we really hope this makes an impact. And I'm sure with more conversations like you're bringing to the table, we will. So thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing. And guys, until the next time, safe travels.